Hello, my name is Marie-Luise Angerer. I'm a professor of media studies and cultural studies from Germany, from the city of Cologne, from the Art Academy of Media. I have been invited to Bogota, to the university, to talk about my recent work, which is about affect theory. I'm talking about affective knowledge, about the interval, plasticity, and the smallest movement. I did my studies in Vienna in Austria, and I studied communication and film, art history and languages. And when I finished my studies, the first thing what happened to me was that I couldn't find any job. So I tried to get grants to continue my research. And then in the early 90s, I went for the first time in my life to California in the United States. And I started with my research on body image and, at that time, new technology, new media. And when I arrived in California, everybody was doing the same than I was doing. So I was very impressed and at the same time also shocked that everybody seems to work on body. And whatever I find in literature, at seminars, at the university, everything was about the body, the body in cyberspace, the body outside of cyberspace, and so on. And the same happened, when I got back to the United States in 2005, and I have started doing my research on affect. It seems as if everywhere was interested in affect, in art, in media, in theory. Everything has turned from the body into the interest of affect. The interest in affect has been related from the very beginning with the promise from the new technology for immediacy, authenticity, tactility, and haptics. So from the very beginning, new technology promised us that there will be an access to immediacy, to an effective response via our body. So it's not so much any longer about our skills in communication and in language, but it's more about the bodily reactions and our spontaneous reactions towards, for instance, film and media. So this was, from the very beginning, the most important thing, that affect was not an innocent interest in something new. Actually, affect is very old, but it was, this promise that via affect, through affect, we get an immediate access with this new technology to something like a new sensation of our environment. My interest in affect was not only driven by this promise of authenticity and immediacy, but was affected a little bit from something else. Since I'm a media theorist and I have been dealing for many, many years with film and media theories, which have all been dominated for many, many years by ideological critique on the one side and psychoanalytical interpretation. And in psychoanalysis, sexuality plays the most important role. And with sexuality, the human being is actually, in psychoanalysis, defined through language and sexuality. This is actually, these old truths of the human being. Now, with the arrival of affect, this frame of media and film studies have been shaped in a very tremendous way. There was in the 80s the two very important books by Gilles Deleuze, the French philosopher, who wrote these two film books or cinema books. And in these cinema books, he introduced for the first time his theory of affect and the bodily response, which is so important especially in film. And he accused psychoanalytical theory not having dealt enough with this somatic bodily response towards film. And with these two books, or after these two books, which has been translated into English and German and Spanish and everything, everything turns into this affect. And now, especially in media and film theory, people were no longer interested in psychoanalytical interpretation of films or media programs, television programs, but they turned to, or they tried at least, to understand that we have to see films and media in a different way, especially through our affective lens. That means, we are not so interested any longer, or if I say we, I want to say, media theorists and media study person, but more, we are not so much, or not any longer interested in meaning or political messages, but we are more interested, or the questions go, how are these messages, how can I say this? How do they come through sound, image, through the editing, through the rhythm of the films? So it's not so much about, the meaning by language, by communication, but it's more about, how do images, how do sounds transport a different kind of message, a message people react towards in a very bodily, strong sense. This is a story actually by Brian Massumi about Ronald Reagan, the former president in America, but as you all know, Ronald Reagan was in his former life, he was an actor. And he started his autography, Ronald Reagan started his autography with a very famous sentence. He had, in one of these films he played, he had to say, "Where are my legs?" And in this film, he played a guy who was amputated by a medical doctor because, he wanted to marry the daughter of this doctor. And for this, because the doctor didn't want, his daughter getting married with Ronald Reagan, the actor, he was amputated. And when he awoke in the film, the first moment was, that he couldn't feel his legs any longer. And he had to say this sentence, "Where are the legs of me?" And then Ronald Reagan told these stories hundreds of times, and he said, the moment when he was filmed, when he had to say this sentence, he really couldn't feel his legs any longer. So there was a moment when, this knowing that he's playing a film, he's playing a role, but, the sentence was so deeply inscribed in his bodily structure that he actually couldn't feel his legs for a moment. And this Brian Massumi takes as a starting point to think about what is it when we talk about affective knowledge. It's something the body, one could say, as such knows, even we as subjects, we don't know. This means not forever, only for a moment, for a very small time, and Brian Massumi referred to this time, or for this moment of time, as the missing half second.